This week on the Destination Angler.
Colonel Jack Coffee, or Jack Coffee Hayes, actually, was a former Texas Ranger Indian fighter that was commissioned to find a route on a highway from San Antonio to Chihuahua City. And this was a direct route if possible, but he knew it had to cross the Devils, which nobody wanted to deal with because these deep canyons, lots of cactus, and jagged rocky hillsides. So a lot of their pack animals became lame, and he was running out of time. So he came up on another dead end after sending out scouts to find another route to cross the river. And he looked over the edge, and it was originally called Rio San Pedro. And he says, no, this is the Devil's River.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
And it stuck.
That was our guest, Kevin Stubbs, on how the Devil's River got its name. Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haig. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Hey anglers, welcome back to another episode of the Destination Angler, brought to you by Anglers Coffee, perfecting the coffee experience for the fly fishing community and anglers everywhere with small batch coffee delivered to your doorstep. It's darn near perfect. And by Trout Routes, the #1 fishing app, helping you find new trout waters so you spend less time on the road and more time doing what you love, trout fishing. We've got some great shows lined up, including the wild and remote Middle Fork of the Salmon River in Idaho and the Indian Peaks Wilderness in Colorado. And be sure to backcast to catch the last episode on Rapid Creek in the Black Hills of South Dakota with Hans Stevenson, owner of Dakota Angler and Outfitter. Are there trout in the Black Hills? You bet there are, and it's a small stream mecca. You won't want to miss these shows. And remember to hit that subscribe button to catch all the Destination Angler episodes coming your way. Hey, and if you like the show, please tell a buddy. And become a subscriber on the Destination Angler website to be the first to know about new episodes. And today our destination is the rugged and remote Devil's River in southwest Texas. And our guest is Kevin Stubbs, owner of Expedition Outfitters, New Braunfels, Texas. The Devil's River is a hidden oasis that offers unmatched sight fishing for smallmouth and largemouth bass. Here you'll find gin-clear spring-fed water and a pristine ecosystem largely unchanged for hundreds of years. A Texas native, Kevin has been guiding this area for 20 years. And as a young man, he moved to Colorado to train bird dogs, where he met legendary guide Roy Palm, who taught him how to fly fish. He took a job in Seattle to work for a NASCAR team that went bankrupt, crashing too many cars. But Kevin was destined for guiding, as he soon learned sitting behind a desk in Minneapolis with scientific anglers. And now, lucky for us, Kevin gives us the lowdown on the Devil's River and shares stories of settlers, Comanches, and Indian pictographs, the beginnings of the King Ranch, guiding Nolan Ryan, Brad Pitt stunt doubles, along with tips on targeting carp and smallies. Stick around to the end for a great story on legendary guide Bart Chandler, who rearranged the toilet bowl on the Frying Pan River by hand. Well, let's hear from Kevin. All right, Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you were out on the Devil's River last week, or maybe it was earlier this week, and ran into a little trouble. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, they don't call it the Devil's River for nothing. There's really never been a routine trip out there, and I've been probably 1,000 times. Yeah, we lost a wheel bearing coming back on one of the raft trailers, but that's standard if you're not paying attention. But rough area, it's pretty rugged and remote. You know, the nearest paved road could be 30, 40 miles away, but certainly worth going there to for the sight casting opportunities.
All right. Yeah. How'd you guys do?
We did well. We time our trips mainly during the week. That way we bother fewer people on the river when we're there, and we get bothered by fewer people.
Oh, okay. So even though it's remote, you're going to bump into other people from time to time, huh?
Yeah, there's a lot of folks that will be in good physical shape that will, do the kind of one of the minimum distances is around 14 to 15 miles on the stretch of river that one would have to kayak and or canoe. But we're lucky enough to have these large ranches that have several miles of frontage, and we generally just fish along the frontages of the ranch and use our put-ins and takeouts. That way makes it more convenient for us.
Nice. So you've got some buddies who are ranchers, huh?
Yeah, they're great folks. Been working with them a lot of years. One family from San Antonio, they have quite a few different ranches, but this is one of their favorites on the Devils, and I stand ready to take them fishing on their own place at all times, which is kind of a perk for them as well. Yeah.
Right. Now, what are they ranching in the middle of a desert? I guess, is there enough green there for cows or what are they doing out there?
No, it's really interesting. So the place that we're on there, Sycamore Canyon Ranch, is 8,700 acres and uncounted canyons right on the edge of the Chihuahuan Desert, a lot of rocks. The canyon's about 700 feet deep, or above the river level, the tops of the mesas. And then a lot of the species of the Chihuahuan Desert, cacti and mesquite brush. And it's interesting, 3 biomes come together right there, the South Texas brushland, the Chihuahua Desert, and then the what's known as the Edwards topography and or biologic assemblages. So, and in fact, they all come together on this one ranch. And the ranch has been deferred from grazing for about 40-something years. And so it's all native. What would grow up there hasn't been any cattle or goats or sheep on this particular ranch, and it's under conservation easement so that if the family didn't have it any longer, that it couldn't be developed, with windmill or I should say wind turbines and no strip mining. You can't subdivide it. And so it's encumbered by these conservation easements, which keeps the land unspoiled in perpetuity.
Oh, no kidding. So what do they do with it?
It's a recreation ranch.
Huh.
Great hunting on it for aoudad sheep and nice whitetail. And then, of course, we've got several miles of river frontage, which is my main attraction.
Right. Years ago, you were a hunting guy too, weren't you?
Yeah, I was lucky enough, having moved from Austin and grew up in Austin, Texas. I knew I wanted to be a hunting and fishing guide, could spend a lot of time outdoors. And so I had to get the heck out of Austin because that's a big city. And so I went down to Kingsville, Texas to college. At that time was Texas A&I University. And lucky enough, Kingsville, Texas is the headquarters for King Ranch. Got a job training labs and pointers for some of the family that owns the ranch, and then transitioned in the summertime to running guide boats for some of the same families out on Baffin Bay. So I kind of just luckily stepped into something that I really had no idea. I'm a lucky person.
Well, no kidding. And the King Ranch, let me see if I got this right. It's the largest piece of private land in the country. Is that correct?
Well, it's the largest working ranch in the United States, and so it's a little under 1 million acres. But there are a lot of other very large ranches too. But this one, even though it's 4 different parts, the ranch itself totals 1 million acres. Traditionally under the same operator.
Yeah, and they go back to what, the mid 1800s?
Yeah, I think so, because Captain King and Mifflin Kennedy were partners on the riverboat trade, and they were actually running contraband up and down the Rio Grande River from the Gulf of Mexico. And yeah, so they got the start illicit. Yeah, they were basically smugglers.
Really? Is that right? Yeah. I had no idea. So now when I'm driving around, I see a King Ranch Silverado, I think. I can think of, named after some smugglers. That's pretty good.
Absolutely. To this day, though, smuggling is a big deal down on the border, as we well know.
Oh, my gosh. And the other thing that I've noticed in Texas, don't they do a lot of exotic hunting? Like, haven't they shipped animals in from Africa and you can hunt those?
Interesting you asked that. There are more scimitar horned oryx in the state of Texas than there are in all of Africa.
What? What are they? What?
Yeah, scimitar horned oryx.
That's a type of an animal? I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it's a plains animal. Has these big swept back antlers or horns. Beautiful animal. It looks like an antelope, but it's an oryx.
Really?
If that makes any sense.
An oryx. How big are they?
Shoulder height to a man, most guys. And
really?
Can weigh 6 or 8, 3, 4, 500 pounds, something like that, maybe.
Huh.
There's some big ones, some are bigger than others, obviously. But, and then there are other species like, rhinos being raised on South Texas ranches for reintroduction to Africa. So some of these animals that came over here to these zoo-like ranches, well, we're shipping them back to Africa to replenish their supply.
Huh. And they're always fenced in. Is that correct? Like, I'm not going to see a giraffe running around south of Dallas or something, am I?
No, well, probably not, but they do break out. You're going to see sometimes some of these exotic game animals, sometimes on the side of the road.
Oh, really?
Like, what is it? Yeah.
No kidding.
Could be a wildebeest. I mean, it could be a Sika deer or an axis deer. There's a lot of, black buck. They do real well in South Texas. And so a lot of black buck antelope. And so you'll see them just out running wild.
Zebras? They have zebra hunts too?
A lot of people don't hunt zebras, but they keep them. But, it kind of seems unfair to me.
Why do they just stand there, don't they? I mean, you could
Yeah.
a couple hundred yards away. I mean, I don't know. It seems a little unfair. Man, that's awesome. Well, hey, let's talk about fishing. So, when I think of trout fishing, I don't exactly think of Texas, but you guys do have one river down there that's kind of famous for pretty good sized trout, don't you?
Yeah, the Guadalupe, which kind of have my home office headquarters, the Guadalupe River is the southernmost trout fishery in the U.S.
No kidding. How's the fishing?
It's pretty darn good since we put new ones in each year that are full-size fish. You talk about the the ranches with the exotic game. Well,
right.
I liken the Guadalupe River to that. It's like, well, these trout don't belong here, but they thrive real well through the winter time, and we sure have a great time fishing for them. But we know they do reproduce, because often we're buying, when I say we, Guadalupe River Trout Unlimited is the largest Trout Unlimited chapter in the world, as a matter of fact, located here.
Wow.
But buying full-size fish from the hatchery in Missouri, trucking them down. Of course, Missouri tells us these are more heat-tolerant fish than most. And so we stock them around Thanksgiving time. They're full-size, some of them 1.5 pounds to 5-6 pounds sometimes.
You're buying 5-6 pound trout, throwing them in there?
Yes.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah. And they grow while they're here, but, with our low flows traditionally, when I say traditionally, we've kind of had an extended drought in, this part of in most of Texas over the past almost 10 or 12 years. And we have punctuated with flash floods, of course, but kind of weird how that works.
Yeah.
But at the same time, our traditional flows, if they're not above 150 to 200 CFS on the Guadalupe, then the ones farther downstream, of course, are going to perish. But we put new ones in. When I say we, Guadalupe River Trout Unlimited, Parks and Wildlife, State of Texas does some stocking too.
Yeah. How many members are in that chapter, if it's the biggest in the world?
Well, it's around 6,000.
6,000. So where do you have your meetings? Like in a high school auditorium or something? I mean, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, pretty much. And a lot of that has gone virtual, since the pandemic and all of that sort of stuff. And so a lot of people get to come to the meetings that might not have in the past now that it's on Zoom or something.
Yeah. And you guide on the Guadalupe?
I do. Kind of got started back in this area after I left the corporate world of fly fishing, and I came back down here and started up my guide business again. And that was in roughly 2001. And I knew the fish were here and they're dependable, and we put more in each year. And I thought, well, heck, that's a good kind of, core business to work with in the guiding field.
Yeah. Right. How many miles of fishable water is there?
Well, we probably between Canyon, Dam, and New Braunfels is about 18.5 river miles. The Canyon Lake Reservoir is about 8,400 acres. That's our headwaters. When I say headwaters, the Guadalupe flows into Canyon Lake and then it flows out. But in the meantime, it's going into a reservoir that's up to 180 to, in some places, almost 200 feet deep. So we get this stratified layer of cold water.
Nice.
Cold water at the bottom being more dense. And it comes out of the dam like around 56 degrees.
No kidding. All right. And then even in the Texas heat, you can fish that in the summer. Or do you guys kind of lay off in the middle of summer?
We usually lay off quite a bit or move upstream when we know the temps are going to be, below 65.
Right, right. Aren't you glad? I mean, I just wonder years ago when they decide to make a dam that pulls water off the bottom versus a dam where the water flows over the top. I'm just like, what was involved in those decisions, I wonder, by those engineers, because when they do the ones off the bottom, they've just created a whole new fishery for all of us fishermen, right? A cold water fishery.
Right.
And they change their mind and do it the different way. It's like, okay, forget that. And that's just another warm water. I don't know. You just
I think
wonder.
it's more luck.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got one tailwater in the state of Indiana, and it's 1.25 miles long.
Wow.
And they do put trout in there, but the locals are all worm dunkers over there, and I mean, they'll be sitting on a 5-gallon bucket, trying to just haul as many trout out of there as they can. We're trying to fly fish, so I don't even go there anymore. But anyway, the Guadalupe River, there you go, folks. So if you ever, what's that? Is it down by San Antonio? Where is that?
It's really kind of midway between San Antonio and Austin, which makes for a pretty good commute from either big city. And then cool. There's a lot of rolling limestone hills around it, some cliffs that are 400 or 500 feet high that tower above the river. So it's a pretty experience.
Ah, cool.
But then there are populated areas with a bunch of homes. I just like to kind of take my trips and take my people where, we see more of the topography and scenery than maybe fish behind somebody's house.
Oh, no kidding. You get them out well, you're sort of a wilderness guy here with the Devil's River, because that's how many hours away is that one?
Well, it's 4 to 5 to almost 6 hours away, depending on which part of it. Parts of it are incredibly inaccessible because, for instance, if I wanted to go to the neighbor ranch upstream of Sycamore Canyon, the Jarrett Ranch, while it has a common fence line with Sycamore Canyon, it's a 4.5-hour drive around to get to that ranch, which is,
really?
Right there next to me.
Because there's no road.
Right.
They didn't build a road through the property. You got to go all the way around the property to get there.
Right. Huh? So it's in rugged, jagged canyon hill country, with these canyons are 700 feet deep and some of them, a little bit more.
Okay. Gal, no kidding. Hey, anglers. Well, you've heard me talking about Angler's Coffee now for over a year now, and I have a question for you. Have you tasted it yet? If you have, then you know what I'm talking about. It's darn good coffee, isn't it? And if you're like me, tasting's believing. And believe me, this coffee tastes great. My wife and I are hooked on it. That's because Angler's Coffee offers an impressive spectrum of flavor profiles, so there's something for everyone. Like their smooth, medium roast elk hair caddis blend. Using beans from Central America and Indonesia with a perfect balance of body and aroma, the caddis blend gives creamy sweet tasting notes of milk chocolate and clove. It's a real crowd pleaser. Save 10% with a custom subscription like I did and pick the coffee blends you want delivered to your doorstep. If you're not 100% satisfied, they'll give you your money back, no questions asked. A percentage of each sale goes to some great nonprofit organizations that directly impact the fly fishing community. So put a smile on your face and give it a shot. That's anglerscoffee.com. Tasting's believing. When I first talked to you a couple of weeks ago, I remember I called you because I wanted to do a show on the Guadalupe River, and you're like, well, the Devil's River is like 100 times more interesting. And I'm like, all right, you got to tell me why. So why is that, Kevin? Why do you think it's so much more interesting down there?
Well, it's really pristine. It's 100% spring fed unless there's a flood. And it emanates on the edge of the desert. We're on the edge of the Chihuahuan Desert. And so the water's crystal clear. It's as clear as the Flathead River at Glacier National Park.
That's clear.
Yeah, man, I'm telling you. And I've worked up there. But it's awesome. And so we have a lot of sight casting. The springs, the headwater springs, are midway on the river basin. The river starts up around Sonora, Texas, around Interstate 10, but it's dry for probably 30 or 40 meandering miles before there's actually some springs that come out on the surface. The river's still flowing underneath that gravel bed, but it comes out at the surface at this one particular ranch, the Hudspeth River Ranch, and that's the headwaters near Baker's Crossing. And then it flows about 50 miles unchecked down to the confluence of Lake Amistad or Amistad Reservoir, which is a federal recreation area.
Huh. And that's all the way down on the border, isn't it?
Yeah, we are. So the Devils is one of three rivers that feed Amistad Reservoir, and the Rio Grande, the Pecos, and the Devils. And
Okay.
so three very famous rivers with, different characteristics, total different characteristics. Although the Pecos and the Devils are often referred to as sister rivers because the two canyons, at least through that lower part of the state, are roughly parallel, maybe 25 miles apart, but they emanate, our drainages and spring flow is due to the Edwards Trinity Aquifer, which gets replenished from these rains that come out of the mountains of Mexico.
Really?
And so there's no water coming down, on the Pecos from New Mexico, and there hasn't been for probably 100 years because most of the farmers and ranchers use it up there. So the Pecos starts, of course, in New Mexico, but it comes down and empties into Lake Amistad, or used to be the Rio Grande is where it used to have the confluence. But it runs now traditionally about 60 cubic feet per second, and it's really, when it flows again, it starts at Independence Creek. There's a big ranch that on the Pecos there, but that's why it stays at 60 CFS, is because it comes out of this undeveloped ranch, so to speak. And then, but it used to flow at 200 to 300 CFS consistently, like the Devils often does. But there's so much water removed from that basin that it never really makes it down.
So how's the fishing in the Pecos?
It's good, but it starts out pretty salty because of the surrounding nitrates and nitrites that are, naturally occurring in the hills there. Limestone hills, and then as you go farther down, you become maybe midway to the flow to the lake. The fishing gets better and better, and it's a beautiful river and very rugged and more inaccessible than the Devils, in fact.
Oh, no kidding. And it's mostly bass fishing then, or have you got some trout in there?
It's all bass fishing. Yeah.
Okay. What's the history of this area? Like who settled this area?
Well, at first it was these prehistoric Indian tribes, and there's a lot of rock art around the area. Indian paintings on Sycamore Canyon Ranch, some of them have been carbon dated to around 4,000 years before present.
Really?
Yeah, very intricate, might be depictions of deer with giant racks or shaman. And there's some of them, there's the highest concentration of rock art. One of the highest concentrations is in the Trans-Pecos area, which is Devils, Pecos, and into northern Mexico and Chihuahua. And so it's been likened to some of the rock art in France. In fact, there's a lot of French, scientists that come over and study at the Shumla School that studies rock art based in near Del Rio, as a matter of fact.
No kidding. Like do you take clients, when you're fishing with your clients, you guys hop out and go look at some known sites?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Sycamore Canyon Ranch has 3 or 4 sites, and then
really?
often, and we've got all these fossilized fish in the limestone hills and this beautiful limestone that cleaves off, and arrowheads and spear points, and the ancient people had everything they needed there. And here's the rationale for their rock art: is since they had everything, deer, buffalo. This was formerly grasslands before the ranchers moved in and overgrazed the area, and the desert encroached. So it was formerly grasslands, a lot of bison. And so, all kinds of native, game for the Indians, as well as the river and springs, that they had everything they needed right there on location. So they had the extra time to go do art.
That's a good point. Hadn't thought of that. Okay. So prehistoric Indians, or 4,000 years old, and then what happened?
Well, the settlers came in. Some of the the very first explorers were the Spaniards that landed on the Texas coast in the 1500s. And they actually had expeditions that headed west. And of course, they're looking for gold, and they're looking to convert, the natives to Catholicism. That's 2 of their goals that the King of Spain had sent them, out here. And so some of these some of these indigenous Americans, I hesitate sometimes to say Indian because that means a lot of different things. If you're from India, we know what that means.
Right.
But these indigenous people, there were different tribes, but the Spanish talked about people out in this Devil's Trans-Pecos area that they met that had the dogs moved their belongings. The canines moved with these people on foot. They didn't have horses because the Spaniards brought the horses. There were no horses predating that. And so these folks were nomadic tribes, and they moved to camp almost every day. But the dogs had drags they pulled behind them with all of the people's belongings on them.
Yeah.
And so that was their beast of burden. And as they moved from camp to camp, they might set large fires and drive, like there's buffalo jump sites on the Devils. And so, they might set fires, drive the bison off the edge of the cliff, and then, they've got the slaughtered beast down there. And a lot of people would say, well, the indigenous people only took what they needed. And, they'll say this about, other animal species out there. But the truth is, you're going to end up sometimes with 500 or 600 bison, and you can't do, maybe you've got 30 people in your tribe. Think about that
lot
one.
Of beef.
Well, but at the same time, the opposite end of that is once you start a stampede is how you stop it. Well, hey, the rest of you, we don't need you anymore, so you guys can.
You guys can stop running around. We're good. We got our free buffalo. That doesn't quite work that way. Huge news, folks. The #1 fishing app, and I'm talking trout routes here, has been updated to include the entire lower 48. That's 50,000 streams mapped and classified into 4 categories, and 350,000 hand-curated public access points marked and ready for you to explore. There's nothing more exciting than finding that new trout stream or access point. I'm a huge fan of trout routes because they make it so easy. Say goodbye to stumbling around country roads looking for your next spot, because Trout Routes provides every detail you need for each stream, including public and private bridges, stream flows, trail access, where to park, camping opportunities, boat ramps, and more. No service, no problem. You can save maps for offline use. With Trout Routes, I've found dozens of new streams and access points I never would have known about. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for Trout Routes today on your Apple or Android phone. Yeah, I've seen, I don't know, I feel like I've seen some shows where they're showing, Native American Indians with those dogs, with poles tied around them, dragging, stuff behind them. So super interesting. And then the settlers came in there. Was it the Comanches that lived in that area? Is that right?
There were a lot of Comanches in the area, or I like to refer to them, and a lot of people do, as Comancheros. So a lot of these Comanches/Comancheros were, part Mexican descent, or they might be more, Native American. So there's all kinds of mixing of peoples, because they got the nomadic tribes. They're obviously moving around. And they're moving around people in times like in Chihuahua with established, villages. They're going to intermix, but eventually the Comancheros would end up, there's ambush sites for people, like on the Devil's River, there's Dead Man's Pass.
Ooh.
And it leads to Dead Man's Canyon, which leads into the river. But Dead Man's Pass is about 100 feet wide, and then the sides of it are about 100 feet tall. So it's a very narrow area you have to go through at Dead Man's Pass. This is right near the Devil's River, near Highway 90, actually. And if you didn't go through this Dead Man's Pass, you would have to detour 100 miles either direction. So while everybody knew there was a risk and there could be highwaymen or Comancheros, then, it's like, well, what are they going to do? Well, they're probably going to take your women first. Number
Not
one. Good. Not good, because we need them. They need us. We're a family.
We like them, right? We're our family, they like us.
And they'll take your animals too at the time, anything they could trade, buy, or sell. And so what the government did was send out a detachment. They started a couple of different forts out near the Devil's River. One of them was Camp Hudson up near Baker's Crossing. And Camp Hudson, the first time they established it, they sent, an attachment or detachment of soldiers out there. I believe these were bluecoats, if I'm not mistaken. And they killed every one of them, like within 3 days. And so the U.S. Army would send another batch.
Well, you mean the Indians killed all the bluecoats, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Just
not the other way around. Okay, I got you.
No, that was a long time coming till, they finally learned how to fight. And a lot of these, once these indigenous people got a hold of these horses from the Spaniards, man, they were fearsome fighters,
Yeah, right.
And of course, if they had a 6-gun, man, and they weren't stationary like our bluecoats would have been. Like, they're going to line up and take shots. And meanwhile, the Native Americans are running through them like needle and thread and just shooting the hell out of the guys standing in line. I mean, excuse my
Oh my
French there.
gosh. Yeah, man, it's so interesting, just how these things came about. I've read some books on the Comanches, and they were some tough humburros, man. They were feared.
Yeah, and a lot of the people that eventually migrated out that way were really, really tough. So an old man Fawcett, who settled one of the larger ranches near the present-day Devils River State Natural Area Del Norte unit. But old man Fawcett, when I say old man, well, it'll make you old the more time you spend out in that rough country, because everything wants to bite, stick, or, the cactus and rattlesnakes and stuff. But he drove like 1,500 sheep overland, for several hundred miles to get to this one spot on the Devils that he claimed to start his ranch. And he did. And he lived in Centipede Cave right on the edge of the river, and eked out a living till he could build a family and a house, and then start, homesteading the area. But he was really E.K. Fawcett was one of the first settlers along the Devils River.
Oh, no kidding. When was that roughly?
Geez, I would actually have to look that up. I wouldn't know.
1800s though, still, or?
Oh,
talking...
yeah, probably 1800s, or probably late 1800s, exactly.
Ah, it's fascinating. All right, well, let's get back to fishing. That's I love the history part of all this. If you could break down the sections of the Devil's River for the fishermen, and you're fishing for bass mostly, smallmouth and largemouth, correct?
Yeah, a lot of times, and a lot of people are really starting to get into the carp fishing, and it's just an awesome amount of big, hungry carp out there.
Carp too.
Yeah, oh my God. Some of these are 15 to 35 pounds and might approach 40. And side casting opportunities, almost 100% side casting to these beasts.
Oh, fun. Because the water's super clear.
Oh, yeah. And, you can kind of have control, put that fly in front of them and hope they suck it up. And it's a special technique. People that are consistent with catching carp, it's not just like trying to pound them with a streamer, and they're going to just turn around and chase it down. That doesn't happen very often. It can happen, but it's not very often. So most of our stuff is we're chasing the largemouth and smallmouth. Smallmouth were introduced back in the late 50s, 1950s, and Parks and Wildlife, Texas Parks and Wildlife most people with the agency will deny they did this, because it's really a lot of the species Texas Parks and Wildlife have introduced over the years, they've denied later, or at least said this was a bad idea. How do we correct this? Because there was a different mindset. Now it's like everybody's usually, except for the Guadalupe, rooting for, the native species, so to speak. But they were stocked in there, and they were very successful. The fish, the water's consistently relatively cool for that part of the state, since the springs, emanate out of the ground around 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah. But the smallies have done real well. Man, they're aggressive. It can be up to 5 pounds. I've seen them larger. We've landed larger. Of course, it's all catch. It's the only catch and release river by law in the state of Texas. I think there's a proposal to do some catch and release on some other certain sections, and that's for black bass species only on the Devils.
Huh.
So it's catch and release. So they may not be retained regardless of size, black bass species.
Huh.
In the past, a lot of campers would go from, and I classify the river as upper, middle, and lower. Hey, that's pretty simple, huh?
Yeah.
But upper, middle, and lower have different characteristics and access points as well. And so the upper access point would be Baker's Crossing, that's public. One can put in there. Now, you want to back up and say, don't put your raft or drift boat in this river and expect to be able to take it out, because it'll be shredded, number one, and number two, you'll do countless amounts of portages. So really the only raftable, and not even drift boatable, if you'll excuse the term, section of the river is really the middle section from one state natural area to the other. And then beyond that, toward Lake Amistad, the water gets too shallow and too many portages for one to do that and still actually get it done physically is just almost impossible. So the middle section is raftable for sure, although there are portages like Dolan Falls that's 14 feet that you got to, negotiate. But at the same time, the upper end is just not doable because of the amount of fluted channels and then areas that, won't support the width of a raft.
Oh, really? Because you were saying your rafts get all ripped up there, and how does that happen?
Well, that happens from dragging it across and through the rocks, but that doesn't happen to us because we'll have a boat ramp on the same ranch, and we'll come to an area like that. For instance, Sycamore Canyon Ranch is on that upper to middle end transition, and we portage that by putting it on our trailer, drive a mile and a half, and put it back in the water.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, since we've got access to the ranch with miles of frontage, we have that option as an outfitter.
Oh, that's great. How many miles of, would you say, fishable water is there in that middle section then?
The middle section, I'd say around 16 miles of, good fishable water. And the takeout in that middle section right now is as of this recording, is currently closed there's two state natural areas. There's Del Norte, and then there's the Dan Allen Hughes unit, which is close to the lake, where the Lake Amistad, where the Devil's River runs into it. And so now the southern takeout at Devil's Back is currently closed for road building, and they're trying to make it safer to, traverse this 700 feet of elevation change, in your Prius, so to speak.
Yeah, is that right? Okay.
Yeah, so,
people are trying that, huh?
Well, the park isn't open to the public yet, but they're going to make it more public friendly, and that's their goal.
So public access right now is kind of limited?
It is very limited, and it's mainly for kayaks on doing point-to-point floats. A lot of people, it's interesting too on traffic on, almost all rivers in our area and in the West, Midwest, is that people are generally made a transition to kayaks from canoes. And in the past, we generally put two people in a canoe. So in theory, if there's the same amount of fishers, now we have twice as many boats.
Huh.
So yeah, we do see a lot of boat traffic. And here's one of the common problems. This is actually a secret to fishing the Devils. And all you kayakers out there, there's specific kayaks that do better than others out there. For instance, the ones you can stand up and cast off of, like the Diablos, are awesome because, you're using your sight fishing at that point. But at the same time, you don't want to fish behind another kayak. So you see a guy that's fished, a little section of frontage right there and up under some lily pads, just pick a spot and leapfrog around them. Your success will get greater. Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't go down the river like a pinball machine, crisscrossing and everything, because those yellow and orange and, pink boats put fish down.
Yeah. For how long? I mean, what's your experience there? If you wait 20 minutes, you're okay? Or
no, man, you may have to let reset, for a couple hours or so.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, it's an immediate thing it's guaranteed to put fish down.
So you do not want to be following another kayak?
Exactly. I mean, or another guide raft for that matter. For instance, if we have two guide rafts on the water, we're going to pick two different beats.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Totally different. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I fished up in Michigan, and, Michigan has, we used to call it the aluminum hatch. I imagine it's more kayaks now, but midday, we just forget it. We're not going to fish because you got, all these canoers coming down. But I found up there, maybe they just get so used to it, but a canoe can go over a spot, and if you wait 10 minutes, they'll be right back feeding. Maybe not even 10 minutes. So it's kind of strange how it's just different.
And that could be a function of, the amount of, not necessarily pressure, but pressure from predators in general. For instance, on the Devils, it's this crystal clear water. We have a lot of osprey. We have some bald eagle. There's for sure golden eagles, lots of golden eagles. And
oh, no kidding.
Yeah, they take advantage of those fish. In fact, it's interesting that when we see osprey actively hunting, we're basically like, let's pick up and go find another spot.
Oh, is that right? Huh.
Yeah, I mean, they can be the area can be that sensitive if you have a choice. Now, if you're just floating through there and you have no choice to detour and you don't have a big, large ranch with, driving access, you don't have that option.
Yeah. So talk about the character of the water a little bit. There's some of the pictures I've seen. It looks like you've got some fast water, some riffles and rapids, and then big lakey pools. You even mentioned lily pads a minute ago. Give us an idea of what the water's like.
So the upper end is lighter flow. Right now we're looking at about, and it's pretty low right now. The upper end's flowing at about 40 cubic feet per second, and usually it's around 100. But that upper end, when I say upper end, first 14 miles or so, there's a lot less habitat in places. Although there's these giant pools that actually do make up for that habitat for the narrow section. So it's a narrowing and then an open giant pool that might be 3/4 of a mile long and up to 25 feet deep. And so that's a big
Really?
water column. Yeah. Wow. Of course, if you roll boats over the top of 25-foot water and then you come and fish behind it, you're going to be just fine. But if you're in those confined areas, a foot or two deep, it's a different story. But that the upper end, so while it's limited in the flow, the big springs come in at the Del Norte State Natural Area. So it's Devil's River State Natural Area, Del Norte unit. And today those springs are flowing at about 100 cubic feet per second. So it goes, this last week it's been about 40 to 50 cubic feet per second on the upper end. Then you reach the springs at the Del Norte. They dump in at about 100 CFS. And then there's some more creeks and some smaller springs as you go down toward the lake. But the major springs really are at the Del Norte. It's not that at the headwaters at all. The headwaters is a significant amount of water emanating from, it's called Pecan Springs. But the greater flow comes from out of a cliff, basically and it's the springs at the Devil's River State Natural Area, Del Norte, is the standard for water quality in the state of Texas.
Really? Wow. It's crazy to me. You're in the middle of a desert and you've got this big spring-fed river running right through the middle of a desert. But there you go.
And so, yeah. And you've got to imagine, though, when the settlers first came upon it, actually, it's a funny side story here. I won't bore you too long with it, but at the same time, it is pretty interesting that Colonel Jack Coffee Hayes, actually, was a former Texas Ranger Indian fighter that was commissioned to find a route on a highway from San Antonio to Chihuahua City. And this was a direct route if possible, but he knew it had to cross the Devils, which nobody wanted to deal with because these deep canyons, lots of cactus, and jagged rocky hillsides, and very few natural crossings. I mean, I think along 50 miles of river, there's like basically 3 natural crossings, and they're real hard to get to if you don't know a direct route to them. Yeah. And so he wandered around, under this government contract with his troops and wagons. They took way too many supplies. They damaged their wagons while they were out there. A lot of their mules and horses became lame because they back into the cactus. And there's a plant called lechuguilla, which is like it looks like a little low-growing yucca, and it stabs their Achilles, and that gets infected later. So a lot of their pack animals became lame, and he was running out of time. So he came up on another dead end after sending out scouts to find another route to cross the river. And he looked over the edge, and it was originally called Rio San Pedro. And he says, no, this is the Devil's River.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
And it stuck, the name stuck.
Right. So I saw some of the pictures you sent me. You sent a picture of a helicopter, and I thought, okay, so you're doing some helicopter trips too. Is that right?
Well, here's what we do. So we'll give our clients the option of booking a helicopter tour, and some of our clients have arrived by helicopters, because they're pretty well-to-do, and they have aircraft and stuff. But then other times we've chartered them, at our clients' request to give us a tour of the Devils, and we'll have a look at it, and probably we book 2 hours of time on the helicopter, and we'll see the Pecos too. So, which is only 25 miles away, and at 110 miles an hour, 25 miles, you can cover that pretty quick. And then we'll fly those canyons and then come back to the ranch where we fish or where the cabin is where we stay. We have a waterfront cabin with air conditioning and fireplace, and it's really nice at Sycamore Canyon Ranch. And so, yeah, we use them mainly for tours. It's not so much it's transportation or actually fishing out of them, and we could, but it's a little spendy.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'd be coming in the car, Kevin, if I were fishing with you. Just telling you, I might fly to wherever the airport is, San
There
Antonio,
you
and
go.
drive. I don't know.
A lot of people do. Yeah.
And you're doing multi-day trips on the river typically?
We do 2 shoulder days and then 2 guided days of fishing and 3 nights staying at the ranch at the riverfront cabin. And then we provide fire grilled meals and then, hearty breakfasts and lunches for on the, shore lunch. And then we return to the same cabin each night.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, we do. So it's really convenient. We can take all the gear. It's not doing a point to point float where you got to, oh man, should I only take this rod? No, bring all your rods.
Right. Right. What are some of the hazards in the area? Obviously, it gets hot. Assuming you've got some rattlesnakes. What else have you got? You got to look out for.
There's not a lot of traffic coming, illegal border traffic. There's a lot of folks out there are like, well, do we need to carry guns? Well, here's what happened years ago. So there were very few old settlers that didn't want people to discover the Devil's River. So there's a reputation of campers and kayakers and canoeists getting shot at. And the reason for that is these streamside landowners and or people who thought they were trying to scare people off the river because they didn't want people coming on their river. And that, of course, the Attorney General later on, this is a navigable river, folks. You can't you can't do that.
Ain't your river.
That's right. But these folks, a lot of this persisted up until even the 1970s. And it's not unheard of now that a rancher could fire a few shots into the air. They're not shooting it to hit anybody, but they, if they see you illegally camped and they happen to have a gun, they fire up.
Get your attention.
It does. It gets my attention.
So you know where to camp then, huh?
That's why we
go with Kevin. You won't get shot at. You won't get shot at.
No, we don't get shot at.
So the ranchers are no longer the big threat. Maybe just flash floods, rattlesnakes, and heat, and a few other things, maybe.
Well, and with the heat, yeah, so we have an exceptionally cool summer right now for Texas. We're heading into what people are describing as a super El Nino year, and our temperatures are, on average right now, compared to the past 8 to 10 years, 20 degrees below that we've seen for the past 10 or 12 years. So normally we'd be in the 90s to 100 right now, and we're in the low 80s, Texas. So
nice.
We're gonna have a little nicer summer coming on than we usually expect, especially on the Devils. But we as a company, Expedition Outfitters, we don't do trips in the summer out on the Devil's River and book them for guided because it's simply, even if it gets up in the 90s in the afternoon, we're rowing around big rafts. It's the heat of the day. And really the better fishing is in morning and evening once it gets real hot like that. And it's hard to break that up properly because, some clients might want to have a few beers at lunch or whatever like that. And then they take a big old nap and we're like, guys, it's time to go fishing. They're like, well, this nap is sure feeling good.
Okay, it's your money. So when are your seasons? When do you take people?
We start in late September when it starts to cool off here, and we'll go through Thanksgiving, and then we'll transition to guiding on the Guadalupe about Thanksgiving when we restock the trout here. And then we'll pick up again out on the Devils the last week of February and then run through probably the third week of May, avoiding spring break at all costs.
Oh, is that right? Okay. And are you still running trips out there this time of year because it's been so cool?
Well, we had our last one, and we were very lucky this last week. Just finished it up. Our highest temperature while we were out there was 87, and man, it was delightful. We were expecting 90s. We had to reschedule it and move it farther out than normal, but it really worked out well. We had good cloud cover and light north wind, and it was just awesome.
Oh, that's great. Very good. Well, let's talk about your story a little bit. So let me see. You're from Austin. And somehow you end up moving to Colorado and Seattle and a few other places. Tell us about all that.
Well, I'm going to keep it short, but parts of it were, pretty interesting. So had my guiding business. I started down in South Texas, got sick of the heat. We were training our bird dogs, and we decided to, this friend of mine, Danny Duff, who's a great guide and outfitter and a high school chum, we went up to Glenwood Springs, Carbondale, Aspen area, and got to work on a ranch that was on the Roaring Fork. And the ranch had 6 miles of frontage. Yeah, it was a great, beautiful river, of course.
Yeah.
And we were training our bird dogs up there in the summer because it's too darn hot in Texas. So we'd take the pointers and the labs up there, and we're both in the back of our minds wanting to, you know, kind of enlarge our career, so to speak, or at least diversify somewhat. And these fly fishing guides that were actually legendary, you know, to this day, one of them's Roy Palm, who had Frying Pan Anglers. God bless old Roy. He helped train us, and Danny and I trained one of his labs, Flicker, and he taught us how to cast. And then
Really?
Bart Chandler, another legendary guide up there, Bart Chandler, who's purported to have rearranged the toilet bowl, so to speak, on the frying pan there. So he started moving rocks around and he's like, well, it's going to be a better fishery. And people are like, you can't move rocks around.
Moving rocks around, like with a front end loader, or like how do you move rocks?
No, by hand. Yeah.
Really?
No, totally by hand.
Does that work?
It worked making a better fishery, but nobody liked the fact that he was manipulating the environment.
Huh.
And so he kind of got in a little trouble for that. But, you know, I don't think it was a big deal, but he made it a better fishery. But he was one of our mentors as well. And then these guys had to come to our ranch for their drift boat access, the ranch we were working on. And it also had some spring-fed ponds with giant browns on it, 28, 30-inch browns, and giant rainbows, you know, 25-inch rainbows. And we would cast to those at time, and it really helped our skills. And those guys said, well, you know, we've got some overflow trips, and they gave us wade trips and everything. And of course I was thinking at the time, and as was my friend Danny Duff and I, you know, as guiding side by side, is like, you know, my God, let's not ever get a real job again.
Is that right? Okay.
So kind of humble beginnings there, but then moved from there, you know, took those fly fishing skills back to the salt water for a little while. And it wasn't that popular down in South Texas. So there wasn't a way to make a living fly fishing. So we both, he and I, went back to, you know, soaking croakers, so to speak, which is a bait fish, and throwing bait, because that's what most of our customers wanted to do. And then we transitioned to lure fishers. And then later in our careers, both of us moved inland and did more mountain guiding stuff, and worked at Glacier National Park for a few seasons there on the Flathead, which was awesome. Yeah. And then hosted trips in northern British Columbia for a while until COVID shut us down. When I say that hosted, I was a travel agent, and then helped arrange things up there. And my partner had 1 million acres of on this commercial permit up there, and we had a fly-in camp. It was
wow.
Our camp was actually, it's really cool. Our fly-in camp was actually part of an old camp for the Hudson's Bay Company.
Nice.
Really rich heritage up there. But eventually returning back down to, you know, Texas, and decided it was too hot again. And then I went up to Seattle, and I went fishing up there, and man, my goodness, what a fishing haven. You know, you got the sound, the mountains, rivers, salt, you know, gorgeous. And so I ran out of money eventually. I had to get a job.
Shoot. Darn it. Money thing.
Dang it. Yeah, it keeps circling back on me. But I was really fortunate. One of the first jobs I got, real briefly, was with a NASCAR race team, you know, selling sponsorships. And the whole team ran out of money pretty quickly when the owner, you know, had spent like $3 million in 6 months or something like that.
Was he crashing cars or?
Oh, yeah. He crashed them all the time. In fact, when I'd go in to sell a sponsorship to somebody, one of my big clients or sponsorship targets was Ford dealerships, you know, the car dealership itself. And we'd take the car hauler over there in one of the show cars, and we'd show it on a Saturday, and it'd help build traffic. And then I'd say, well, you know, let's put your name on the car, and we're going to get camera time because Larry always hits the wall. You're more camera
like, okay, I'm in.
time. Yeah. If he's going to hit the wall,
big
that
wreck car
great,
and my logo on it. That sounds awesome. Yeah. That worked though, huh? That's funny.
Well, it didn't work in the long term. So I actually found a job in the media business, repping hunting and TV shows. We repped Orvis Sporting Lives on ESPN2. and then a lot of magazines. And then eventually found out that was kind of a cruddy business based in an office and didn't get much time outside. So got a new job just down the street from there going to lunch. I knocked on the door and there was a Microsoft retiree starting a new company. There was actually a help wanted sign on the door, and I went in and it said marketing manager needed. And I was like, wow, man, cool.
That could be me.
So I walked in there and he said, well, we're doing a consolidation. We're going to buy up some fly fishing companies and put them under this one brand called Streamworks. And I thought, well, that's cool. Tell me more. And you're looking for help. And I'm a fly fishing guy, by the way. So,
I do this.
yeah. So I understand this, and I know it from the media side because I've been selling media. So I walked in there, and it helped me tremendously in my career that I sold these media spots as well as helped do a few productions, that I put those skills to use in buying ads and helping with our media campaign and somewhat the business plan for the company. And we acquired about 14 different brands. One of them was Charlton Reels, which is world's most expensive fly reel, now called Mako. A lot of you know about Mako reels.
I didn't know that.
It's all designed by Jack Charlton. And we had all these other products, mainly West Coast companies. We as a company thought, Jim Klug, first of all, joined our company as our sales manager. He came from the sales rep side. Jim later went on to start Yellow Dog Fly Fishing and Worldwide Travel. And of course, Jim is actually the guy's a crackerjack, one of the smartest businessmen I've ever met, and really a solid character. And he gave us the strength as a company to go in there and make this sale to scientific anglers, because our company made an offer to scientific anglers, or to 3M, to buy scientific anglers from them, because we thought we needed a fly line company. So why not get the best at that time? We thought.
Go buy one.
Yeah, let's go buy that thing. And we had all this Microsoft money back in our project. And, that was some deep pockets back during the dot-com boom. And so really, the more that scientific anglers / 3M were looking at our consolidation effort, they thought, well, we kind of like this fly fishing business, and it's just a project in 3M, because that was, at that time, it was like a Fortune 50 company. I mean, it's a big company. So Scientific Anglers is just a small project and kind of a pet project of 3M at that time. And so they thought, no, we like what you guys are doing, and we want to acquire you. And we're a young company at that time, like 18 months old. And so we were acquired. Streamworks was acquired by 3M Scientific Anglers. And Jim and I were the only two from Streamworks that made, Jim Klug and I, the trip to St. Paul to start working again for corporate. And my goodness, what a great company, Scientific Anglers and 3M. But I'm telling you, the movie Office Space, that was our experience.
That was you? Oh, no. Did you get the TPS report in yet?
Boy, we had them on time every time.
Oh, man. Oh, those big companies, right?
Real quick side story, though. So we're being acquired by Scientific Anglers, and Jim Klug comes up with this idea. He goes, well, we need to have a sales meeting with our reps, and kind of get their feel about this acquisition if they want to make the trip to Scientific Anglers. So let's have a sales meeting in Belize. And I was like, well, that's an awesome idea. Yeah. And of course, that's what our bosses said. In Belize? We're like, guys, we're in the fly fishing business, by the way. They're like, well, that sounds expensive. I'm like, and all of us were like, no, it's R&D. And we're in the fly fishing business. Did we mention that before? And these guys, and basically Jim stood up to him and just said, this is what we're going to do. And really to overcome the opposition, he went to the chief financial officer at Streamworks and says, hey, Jim, there's another Jim. He says, why don't you come along? That way, what we're doing is on the up and up. And he goes, well, that's a great idea. Well, okay, I approve this project now.
Yeah, I'm in because I'm going.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. And then you end up coming back to Texas. How'd that happen?
Well, once again, working at office at 3M corporate, there's 18,000 people at head campus there at St. Paul. Really cool company. Had a great time. And my boss one day, he was like, so Kev, he goes, so this is a really cool job you have working here for Scientific Anglers. He goes, so you're handling the media buy, you're hanging out with all the magazine people, you're doing our public relations, handling the advertising, the sports shows, and all this fun stuff. He goes, I think I'm going to take over your job, and I'm going to get you to handle customer service. I was like, sure, George. I go, and I took my hat off right then, didn't have a hat on, but so to speak, and set it on the table and said, George, the reason is that I'm here is not because of this company. It's because of fly fishing. And so, at that point, he goes, so you're leaving? And I'm like, well, I'm giving you a notice. It's going to be a few months because I'm helping with this integration of the companies. But yeah, I'm leaving.
Yeah, okay. Oh, no kidding. Well, now you're back home, huh?
Back home, started my guide business at Canyon Lake in the Guadalupe, and that's been my kind of core business where I've been able to kind of reach out and do other things from now. I've been very fortunate and walked in at a good time, and a lot of good guides down here. We've got a lot of guides, a lot of really top-notch guys that guide out of state, and Chris Jackson, one of my closest friends at Action Angler, he's going to be up doing the Black Canyon of the Gunnison all summer. And
nice.
a lot of our friends will go to Montana and elsewhere. And some of them will head down to the Texas coast and fish for redfish and see trout on fly down there too. So.
And you've got a guide school, right?
Yeah, the guide school is interesting too, in that I have trained some of my best competitors.
Yeah. Better you than someone else.
Well, that's true too. I mean, but at the same time, it's a little disheartening. So you check Google ranking or something like that on your website, and it's like, well, that kid, I taught him how to build a website, and he's, wow.
He's outranking me. How'd that happen?
Yeah, how did that happen? And then seeing him with, bukus of clients, no, that's good. I love to see him progress and excel and be successful like that. And I've touched on a lot of the guides around here, with experiences and helped them where I could. And then others not so much, the ones not so much, it's not that there's anything adversarial. It's just our paths don't often cross,
Right.
Definitely
right.
not a bad deal. Guides get along well here on the Guadalupe, much better than elsewhere. Much better.
And you sent me a picture of Nolan Ryan, and I was wondering, did you take him fishing recently?
Yeah, man, that guy's super cool. It's kind of interesting.
Well, tell everybody who he is first, because he's been retired from baseball for a long, long time. So some of my younger listeners might not know who he is.
Right. So Nolan Ryan is an MLB Hall of Famer, famous for pitching no-hitters. He's worked for the Texas Rangers. When I say worked, he's been on the teams, and the Houston Astros. And he's had a vast circle of influence in baseball, and is really one of the most kind gentlemen, big guy. There's some videos out there of, a batter. He hit a batter with the ball, and the rumor was if Nolan Ryan hit you with a pitch, he meant to do it.
I'll bet.
Yeah, he's got control. And so he hit this one batter, and it may have been in the thigh or something like that. And that batter ran to the pitcher's mound and attacked Nolan on the mound. And if you see the brawl, I mean, that poor batter got whipped. And so big man, really kind-hearted, but don't come up here and try to kick him.
He clocked him, huh?
Yeah, man.
Wow.
So anyway, a great sportsman. He's had his own TV shows in the past, really, hunting and fishing shows, and owns, nice ranches where they do hunting trips down here as well, but a very gifted sportsman that I was very lucky to hang out with. Quick story. So my brother he asked me, so you're taking Nolan? Says, well, did you get a baseball for him to sign? I'm like, I didn't even cross my mind. He goes, he said, go to Walmart right now.
Get a baseball.
Get a baseball and take it back with you tomorrow. I got so lucky. They had one in like a little presentation case, little plexiglass, genuine MLB ball. And I show up the next morning at our fishing trip. We're doing day trips on the bottom part of the Devils, driving back and forth to Del Rio. And I hand him the ball to sign. And I goes, man, I hate to ask you this. Hey, no problem at all. He says, I do this all the time. He goes, and his partner, Don Sanders, who's his business partner, goes, you only brought one ball?
Yeah, really? You could have had him sign a dozen and give them to all your friends.
Exactly.
Wow.
Because that's what most people do. But he was kind enough to do that. Yeah, I'm pretty lucky.
And you've taken some other fairly well-known folks fishing too, right? Like Don Johnson from Miami Vice. Didn't you tell me he was on a trip once?
Yeah, we crossed paths with him in Aspen. We actually had Robert Wagner, who was one of the great all-time actors, I think. It takes a thief and a lot of good old shows, growing up as a kid. And he was one of the most gracious fly fishers we've ever worked with, and just a down to earth guy. And of course, we went out with Goldie Hawn, and we could go on list.
Goldie Hawn fly fishes?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
The laughing lady.
Yeah, absolutely. And
that's
of course,
great.
Kurt Russell too. They came down on the ranch. But those folks that are in and around Aspen and have homes there, they make their way out into the countryside. They're not just all holed up in the house.
Oh, that's cool. Well, that's good. Well, let me ask you something with, kind of all your ups and downs in business. I don't know if you had a lot of downs, but I feel like maybe you've had some lean times and some big times, like after you guys sold the company to 3M, that sounds like maybe a big time. Like I'm kind of curious, what have you learned from the lean times and from the big times?
Wow, man, that's a great question. See, that really is, and it's kind of the question that I ask my guide trainees or the parents of, or people to consider. It's like the number one thing is you have to have the support of people around you to maintain your guide status, and you have to be prepared to take inconsequential fill-in jobs because there's the flood drought cycle. So let's say that you're guiding on a river somewhere, and now all of a sudden you've got this 100-year flood, and it's going to be blown out for 3 months. That's most of your season. And then what are you going to do? Luckily, people in our business, if they're proficient fly fishing guides, can go just about anywhere and sign on and guide.
Yeah.
Just go somewhere else. So having that diversification on geography, and a lot of the young fly fishing guides, they are not just young, but just new fly fishing guides I'll work with in the guide school, and just, coming across and cross paths with, is that maintain this geographical knowledge and this expertise. How am I going to spread this thing over this lean time like this? Well, you know what? In the meantime, I might have to cut lawns, or, this one young man who's trained as a guide recently, until he saved up enough money to buy a guide raft, he had to run a weed eater, had to work for a landscaping company, but he knew his goal. So we got to be, willing to do something to fill in. But the most important thing is to have your support of your family and friends. So like if your wife doesn't approve of you guiding, there's going to be problems.
No kidding. Wow. And you're doing these multi-day trips, right? So you're basically traveling a lot, aren't you?
We do travel a lot. I was out this last time at the Devils for about 10 days, and then you come back and resupply. And if you have another trip right afterwards, it might take 3 or 4 days in between, and, getting your vehicle ready and checking on the weather. So it's a lot of variables.
A lot of work, I'm sure. You mentioned carp fishing at the very beginning, and I wanted to ask you about that. Like, how are you targeting carp? Give us some tips on carp fishing.
Okay, so first of all, let me back up and say I'm not a carp expert, although I know how to catch them. That's not what I generally set out to do. There are carp experts. I know a new good friend of mine who's an awesome guide, Mitch Kempe, lives up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He is a carp expert. There's another one, Odom Wu, in our area, is a carp expert. He's a board member of GRTU, Guadalupe River Trout Unlimited. But there are these guys who are carp experts, that they routinely go out and catch these 25 and 30 pounders. But they think of them as bonefish, and you got to get close enough to them to present that fly, have it down. They're actively feeding if their head's down. You got to sneak up on them, get that fly to them, bonefish type pattern. There's all kinds of carp flies, but they'll eat different things, crustaceans, slugs.
Oh, will they? Okay.
Yeah, vegetation. And so you've got to put it out in front of them as they're foraging. When I said got to, sometimes they will chase a streamer. Sometimes they will, but less often. But, it's a precise game, though. It's a very precise game. And you're targeting usually individuals. And you might see 6 or 8 of them, rooting around together, in the shallows or something like that. But you've got to single one out.
No kidding. And they're super spooky too, aren't they?
Man, you blow them out and they're done. They're not going to eat the rest of the day.
Wow.
And when they blow out, it's high speed. I mean, they just blow up. They're afraid of everything.
I've hooked them in my neighborhood, and they do blow up. I mean, just you can't believe it, in little ponds in my neighborhood. But what about smallmouth? What are you doing to target smallmouth?
Smallies, there's a lot of really good baits. Top waters, the traditional hard body popper is not that effective any longer because the fish have become accustomed to it. The devil smallies, since once again they're protected by law, you cannot retain them legally. But a 5 or 6 pound smallie on the devils could be 14 years old.
God, no kidding.
These fish have been around a long time. They have seen a lot of junk. And the hard body poppers, it seems to me, and you make generalizations in our business, and there's exceptions all the time. And as soon as you make a rule, something will break it. So these are generalizations. But I'll use a lot of times, a top water pattern that's not a traditional hard body popper that, you might skate across the top, and then streamers. Here's the big thing. This is the secret and it is not called that a game changer without good cause.
Yeah.
The game changers are game changers.
They are. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, if that's my second biggest secret, I really hate to give it away.
Okay.
Man,
well, people know about game changers. Yeah.
Yeah. Game changers.
Would you have a favorite color, or does that? I find with bass fishing, color can change from day to day. One day they're on purple, next day they're on right.
A good friend of mine, Brant Broderick, who's the TFO rep, some other lines as well. He's awesome smallie fisherman, and he's fishing that white game changer. I've never fished white ever, and he just slays.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah, big white, huge fly, and they nail it.
Yeah. I mean, it is. I'm like, you're going to scare more fish than you're going to catch. And he's like, well, I don't know, man. Watch this.
I know white works. What about for largemouth? What do you like there?
Streamers again, for the most part. Once again, game changers do well. Let me see. Meat whistles, great fly.
A meat whistle.
Yeah.
That's a new
meat
one.
whistle's a great fly. It's got like a cone head with a piece of rabbit strip on the back.
Okay, sure. All right.
Yeah.
Do you fish poppers like in the evening? I do well with largemouth in the evenings with something on top.
Yeah, but once again, the largemouth are cluing in on the hard bodies. So I'm feeling that deer hair may be more successful.
Yeah. So they're getting selective on you. These bass are getting selective, huh?
They are. They really are.
No kidding. Got to change it up.
That's different in the big reservoirs like Canyon Lake. Your topwater patterns, you're dealing with a lot more water column than in the river. Our rivers are just a narrow ribbon of water, and then you get into a giant reservoir, that's up to 200 feet deep, and, suddenly you've got a whole new,
super clear. Hey, tell me the story of this stunt double friend of yours for Brad Pitt, and the river runs through it. I'd love to hear about that.
When we were at Streamworks in Seattle, it was real interesting. Jason Borger was one of the stunt doubles for Brad Pitt while filming River Runs Through It. And he told us some really cool stories about being on set there, and then what the director, Robert Redford, wanted, and then what Jason was able to deliver, because Jason's a technician, fly fishing technician. Of course, Gary Borger is his dad, very rich fly fishing heritage, the Borger family there. And so Jason had related a couple of stories to where he went out, the director, Robert Redford, had specified a particular type of cast, and, you're going to stand on this rock and basically wear the same clothes that, that one of the characters is wearing.
Yeah.
And you're going to be, the stunt double deal. And so Jason gets out there and does this cast, like, this beautiful cast and everything like that. And Redford calls him back in and says, no, that's not what I want you to do. And Jason goes, well, he goes, what he said is, that's not how you do it. I think Jason said, well, actually it is how you do it, or how I do it. That's how it's done. It's
that shadow casting thing. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So Jason Borger said that is how you do it. Shadow casting works.
Yeah. Well, here's what he did is, so he showed him the technically correct way to present this fly in this environment.
Yeah.
And then the director says, no, this is how you want. I want you to do it. And Jason says, well, that's not the proper way to do it. And he goes, well, get out there and do it anyway. Because this isn't real anyway.
Because this is Hollywood.
That's right.
Yeah. Because it always just cracks me up, like all that shadow casting stuff. I'm thinking, looks like a really good way to put the entire pool down, like in 30 seconds, but I don't know.
No, absolutely. And that's one of the big problems that I see when I have clients get in my boat, especially if you're lucky enough to get a dry fly opportunity, is they get enamored with casting. And it's like, sir, you just lined all of our fish.
Yeah. Stop false casting.
Yeah. Yeah, please, we don't need to put it down there when you're, okay, set it down.
Put it down there. So Jason must have met Brad Pitt then, huh?
Oh, of course. They're on the set together.
Hung out with a guy.
Yeah. And there was another stunt double that helped him out, doing various scenes too. So there was, it's some teamwork involved there, but Jason was one of the people that came out of it too. And he wrote some nice stories about it for various publications, very gifted author, and then wrote The Nature of Fly Casting, which is an awesome coffee table book, as well as, instructional manuals too. So, a lot of cool stuff.
Did he have any idea? I wonder if anybody who was making that movie had any idea that this was going to be this iconic, legendary movie someday that's going to really change the face of fly fishing, particularly in America.
Well, it's interesting you say that. So in my stint in fly fishing manufacturing, working for Streamworks and then Scientific Anglers, everybody's getting together at these trade shows that we have, and then the consumer shows as well. And the other manufacturers were standing next to the Sage booth, which is next to the, Airflow booth, which is next to the Nautilus Reels booth, and everybody's like, well, we need another movie. So the industry has recognized that, and they've tried to push various things. And I think kind of the transition we've made to kind of grow our industry, so to speak, is through social media now. It's not so much that you go to a theater, that's going to turn things around, but it might be that influencer now. And I have some friends that, and companies are definitely believing in it. I have friends that were some of the top fly fishing guides. One of them from Austin, notably, won't mention his name, but one of the most gifted fly fishing guides. And he basically doesn't even need a guide anymore because he's just, doing promos.
Doing promos? I'm curious because you have been in this business for a long time. You're kind of the old man on the river down there, right? The longest operator on both the Guadalupe and Devil's River, correct?
Yeah, but it's still in business, right?
It's still in business. What changes have you seen over the years that you've been doing this?
Well, it's grown exponentially. When I first got started on the Guadalupe, there were 4 full-time guides. And this was right around 2001, 2002. And we had enough trips. It was interesting, too, because I'd been trained in Colorado, and I'd really never fished the Guad much down here. My friends I'd come back and forth to the salt water, whatever, in my guiding career down to one of the ranches. And they'd say, you really ought to try that Guadalupe. And I just blew it off thinking it was like little fingerlings that they were stocking. Yeah. I didn't realize they were stocking, 3 to 5 pound fish, routinely.
They'll get your attention.
Got my attention. And so having been trained in Colorado, that the guides up there, Roy Palm, notably said, for frying pan anglers, he goes, so I'm going to teach you boys how to technical nymph. He goes, and it will work in any river of the world. It will pay your bills if you pay attention to what I'm about to teach you. Huh. And I was all ears.
Right.
And then I moved down here after leaving Scientific Anglers because the office scene wasn't for me. I came down here and I just kind of threw out a shingle, called a local newspaper in San Antonio and asked the sports writer if he wanted to go fly fish for trout on the Guadalupe. Mind you,
smart.
I have never been on this river and fished it when I gave that guy the invitation. I just bought a new raft, or actually was working as a rep for Outcast Sporting Gear. Makes a really nice customized, it's a subsidiary of Air.
Yep.
And so I was a rep for them. So that, once again, luckiest guy in the world, they provided me with boats with no cost up front. If I'd come down here, be their rep and show them around and row their boats on the river, and I did. And so my opportunity was you either sell it and send the money back to the factory, or you send the boat back to the factory and they'll send you a brand new boat.
Yeah.
So, I mean, couldn't refuse the deal. And so I did that, walked on down here. The sports writer got into my raft. They just designed the Pac 1300 at that time. I rigged up my rods just like I would on the Roaring Fork, and I had my fingers crossed, and we hammered fish.
Oh, wow. With the sports writer? The sports writer was with you?
Yep. It's interesting. So with the sports writer, got a full page write-up in the Sunday paper. At that time, people read newspapers. This was
what are those?
2001, 2002. And so he said, made all these compliments and everything like that. And I had no idea it was coming, my contact information. And my phone didn't stop ringing for 2 years.
Is that right? That's a great story.
Man, and luckiest guy in the world. And of course, there are opportunities like that. And a lot of these newer guides, what they'll do is a different version of that is build their Instagram presence, get their followers, knowing they're going to guide downstream, later in their calendar. And they're all prepared when they walk on, and then they start cultivating, this following, and it works.
Sure.
We literally from social media, book, a significant amount of trips.
Yeah, I'm with you. Oh my gosh. Well, hey, listen, we're winding down here. I got 2 questions left for you. One is there any place you can go at the end of a long, hot day or a great day on the Devil's River to go get something to eat and something to drink at the end of the day? I suppose you go back to the ranch, don't you?
Yeah, we do on our trips for sure, because, we have a dedicated full-time cook on our trips. But if you were to leave there, and after you did your shuttle and you're headed back to maybe your hotel room in Del Rio, Manuel's Steakhouse.
Manuel's Steakhouse. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah,
there is a steakhouse. All right. How about that? All right. And what's your favorite shore lunch?
Well, we do simple stuff, just sandwiches usually. It's not glamorous, but it is good. We try to fresh cut cold cuts from the, not packaged stuff and like that. But, pretty simple. Try to find shade.
Yeah.
Most of the time. Absolutely. But we're real simple on the shore lunch. It's not going to be the bottle of wine with the checkered tablecloth. And let me tell you why. Because the portages and some of the short, shallow areas we go through, that just any extra weight in that raft, it's not appreciated at all. And so we try to keep, while we have that tradition and we'd like to perpetuate the Montana, experience like that.
Sure.
The truth is, if our guys, have a couple of drinks or beers or a bottle of wine at lunch, they're not that effective in the afternoon.
It doesn't help. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Hey, Kevin, it's been great talking to you. Thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thank you too, Steve. And look forward to crossing paths soon.
Yeah, me too. I hope to. This part of the world sounds so interesting. I'd love to get down there just to see it and fish it a couple of days. How can people get in touch with you?
Our web address is expedition-outfitters.net, and then that'll have our phone contact as well as email address on that. And that'll give you some information on our website, or if you just Google Expedition Outfitters, that's our company name. You can come up with our site.
There you go, folks. Give Kevin a call. And thanks again for being on the show. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Kevin, I wish you extraordinary success in all your adventures to follow. And we'll post all your info on our Destination Angler website show notes. And Kevin sent me some great pictures. We'll put those out on Facebook and Instagram so you guys can kind of check out the area. You can DM me or email me with comments and suggestions at shake50@gmail.com. Hey, if you like the show, please share with a buddy. As always, our music is by your brother's Fountain. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you again soon. Tight lines, everybody.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see. Yeah.